Kathryn, I'm going to hand the ball off to you to go through the lessons learned and kind of a keynote of what we experienced on set.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. My name is Kathryn Brillhart. I was an executive producer and the director of virtual production on our project, Ripple Effect. And I'm going to pull up, do a screen share here so you can see the visuals. Cool. So in addition to COVID safety and remote workflows on this project, we also explored virtual production methodologies. And so I've prepared a deck that walks us through a few of our test cases and has really divided the project up into our three main shoot days: the truck, the battlefield, and the dining room sequence. But to kind of go back to the very beginning, virtual production is a broad term, and there are currently four main ways the industry categorizes its techniques for hybrid live action projects such as ours. Out of these four categories, we used approaches from about three of them. First, real-time visualization tools, performance capture, and the third was exploring real-time game engine workflows to design and execute final pixel in-camera visual effects for display on smart stage LED walls. Our script had three main locations, and for each, we designed and executed virtual background workflows that include an interior dining room scene, an exterior battlefield, and a vehicle sequence. Each produced its own unique key findings, creative takeaways, logistical considerations, benefits, and challenges. But starting with our truck sequence, translates, green screen, and plate photography are commonly used in vehicle scenes as alternatives to shooting on location. On Ripple Effect, we were able to execute and capture footage of our truck that spanned 4 locations and 4 different times of day, all in one shoot day. Instead of using green screens and compositive plate photography in post, our team built full CG environments in advance of the shoot and rendered them in real time on set during production. Rendering the content in real time made it possible to tweak lighting, adjust the rotation of the virtual world, and more during the shoot. This meant that an extended amount of time and resources were necessary in pre-production to break down our script for in-camera visual effects and to lay out our entire pipeline. It was critical that we hired key department heads early on in pre-production to participate in the script breakdown and shot design process. Their input determined the complexity of each shot we planned for. So how is setting up an LED wall virtual production workflow different than setting up a traditional production? Well, first, we're going to reallocate at least 2/3 of our post-visual effects resources to the pre-production stage. Then, the pre-production stage is going to be much longer to account for early in-camera visual effects workflows, stage testing, and pipeline construction. Then, we're going to integrate real-time game engines during pre-production and shooting on stage, bringing computer language, development, and tech challenges to set. Our goal is to walk away from our shoot days with final shots, no additional post-visual effects needed. We were able to save money in post on Ripple Effect because we committed to our process early on. Jumping back into our project workflow, ICVR and Stargate Studios were our main vendors for the truck and dining room sequences. ICVR provided storyboards, previs, techviz, VAD, and on-set content playback, while Stargate Studios contributed consultation as well as on-set camera tracking and LED wall playback. One of the key elements to a successful visual effects is its shot design. At the same time, a DP is forming shots with the director and the visual effects supervisor, the production designer is planning the world of the film. It's critical that these designs are discussed in relation to the shot list in order to economize what areas of the world are constructed in most detail. Centralized databases like F-Track, Shotgun Studios, and Fifth Kind can help keep creative team organized from the development stages all the way through post-production. And this is very helpful, especially if you are client side, integrating vendors like visual effects vendors and visualization vendors early in the process. So ICVR's virtual art department, VAD, created the moving scenery that would play behind the truck. These images show the final look of the content. It's important to note that the content does not look photoreal to the eye. It looks CG. With our short timeline, We knew that from the beginning of the project, we would have about 3 to 5 weeks total working with our VAD teams. We set a goal in each sequence to test the level of photoreal a production might need to budget for in each of these 3 scenarios. So for example, would the content need to sell as photoreal to our eye? Would it need to sell as photoreal on the wall? Or would it need to sell as photoreal through the camera's lens? In this case, we were able to sell a low fidelity visualization quality image to the camera and cheat that it was real. In LED wall virtual production workflows, it's important to have a clear understanding of the desired content quality level for playback during the final shoot as early as possible in the process. These decisions will impact how to budget time and resources on the project, as well as how early to pull in your post-visual effects vendor and potentially other vendors. And also, making evaluations like this during the development and our pre-production phase can help save resources for other shots that require 100% more detail and dedication. So ICVR used motion capture techniques during our previous phase in the truck to identify accurate timing for each scene to ensure we had enough content for playback on set. They also recorded motion for characters inside the truck to help our directors visualize active performance during each scene. We had very limited time with the truck itself, really only the days on set during our final shoot. So having time for our directors to kind of workshop all of this in advance was very helpful for them. Photogrammetry is an essential virtual production tool for a production designer, virtual art department, and VFX team to match the virtual and physical worlds. By scanning our truck early in the process, we were able to use a scale-accurate version of the asset during all phases of our project. It even made its way onto one of the final shots of the film in our battlefield sequence. So this video clip is an example of a previous session held between ICVR, our directors, and DP to work out which shots were physically possible to capture on set, as well as which lenses they plan to use.
You can just hit record there on the bottom of the iPad.
Will it start the animation?
Yep, it should start the animation.
I do have a just a full frontal 2-shot.
That's, yeah.
I'm just spitballing, but I was thinking like at the top of scene 5, we could have some cool shots like this. Like I like how the truck is like halfway through the frame, so that we're getting part of like the character and the landscape, so we can kind of take it in, the fact that we're getting closer to the battlefield in before they make the decision to stop there.
Cool, so this is exciting. It's the beginning of a progression, and you'll get to see next where this went. That was previs. Great. So these images show how this became a final shot captured in camera. If you watch the clip to the right closely, you can see us building the shot together. We call action for the talent. The truck physically starts to rock at some point, and then the content begins to play as well. So I chose this specific clip from Dailies because you can kind of see everything coming together. Pretty cool. That was a fun dance set. Before rolling every take though, our virtual production supervisor, Reiner Gambos, and I analyzed the horizon line alignment of the virtual physical stage, as well as verified real world scale. So we were in fact like on set real time visual effects supervising and helping provide design suggestions as we built shots together. So it was really cool to have that, additional in-camera visual effects component where everybody on the crew, the camera crew, the stage operating team, we could all see the shot building together. These images are another example showing how content that may not be photoreal to your eye on set can still appear photoreal through the camera's lens. In this shot, I'll play it as I talk. This is an example of a shot that may be expensive to execute using a green screen workflow. The camera's movement forward on the z-axis, in addition to the prop and character movement in front of the screen, could be challenging to roto. Not to mention, if a green screen were used, there may have been green light spill inside the truck and on our characters as well that might need post cleanup. So it's an example of planning ahead and capturing the visual effects in camera to ultimately save money in post, which leads to our key findings. So key findings for the truck. I put a bunch here on the slide, but I'm only going to go through a few of them. Content does not necessarily need to be photoreal to the eye. It only needs to sell as photoreal through the lens. With proper distance from LED walls, it's pretty simple to avoid moire. Between moire and fixing scanline and banding issues, moire tends to have more intuitive, like tactile, physical fixes when you're on set, whereas artifacting like scanlines and banding are more like a computing fix on set, and they take a little bit more time to figure out. Double depth of field can create both challenges and benefits depending on the context it's being applied in. So double depth of field, that is essentially referring to the depth of field that the camera is set to, and then adding additional blur to the content or motion blur to the content on the screen, and that can cause a double depth of field. And for the truck, in some cases it was very useful because we were not able to use motion blur post-processing through in-display on set. It just wouldn't work for us. So we used a simple blur effect instead, and it helped reduce seeing staccato movement of grass and different objects that were going past the window. And then at other times, it did kind of have a weird uncanny valley effect. So for us, it was a shot-by-shot basis. And next, I've prepared a few clips from our truck sequence just to show how they came together in the final film.
I always thought of ourselves as lucky. Not everyone who works for the union gets taken care of the way we do.
Ain't no beauty left out here. Just scrap metal and propaganda.
Well, I still think we have the better end of the deal. Don't you think? I mean, somebody's got to collect.
Yeah, well, if it's between dying and collecting, I suppose you're right.
All right, so up next is the dining room interior scene. So in many ways, adding an LED translight behind a window is a very straightforward process. However, there were a few considerations that needed to be made in advance to reduce complexity in some of these scenes. For example, do we see the floor? How do we design the content to show parallax in a believable way? How do we hide the seams in the corners of the screen created by the curved LED panels? How do we avoid moire when the plexiglass window magnifies the LED wall at various perspectives? And when it came to the moire, we actually were not able to completely eliminate it in some shots and had to shoot around it as best as possible. So to briefly describe our pre-production phase, we took reference images and designs provided by our directors to concept and build the virtual world that existed outside the window. And they also simultaneously designed the interior set as well. This image shows a painting that our virtual production supervisor, Rainer Gambos, created as a placement and lighting guide for the VAD team. So he worked together with Rachel, the world building sort of guide, who worked with our directors to build the world, and he was able to help them sort of articulate visually pieces of their vision by doing draw overs, paint overs, and really helping with the design aspects of their worlds. Similar to the truck, We held remote previs sessions with ICVR and our DP to find shots using a Dragonfly virtual camera iPad system. Building a shot list in our virtual environment helped our virtual production team understand which camera angles the directors plan to use the most on set. It was helpful for our AD, who had to factor in specific shot timings for our shoot day. The TechViz process helped us identify how to marry the virtual and physical worlds. We decided that the speaker poles, which you can see in the background in each of these shots, would become a light source during evening scenes to give the DP the ability to pull the virtual lighting onto the practical set, creating a further sense of realism. And just to kind of give perspective on like how some of these decisions were being made, our TechViz, we had parts of it that came before testing on stage, and then we had parts of TechViz that were happening simultaneously to us having access to stage to test. Integrating lighting was a conversation that we had in advance, but we had the most ideas together as a team when we were standing in the space on set, kind of having those beautiful aha moments with the lighting, the practical lighting and the virtual lighting. During our stage testing phase, our team had the flexibility to manipulate virtual assets and refine the composition of the environment in relation to the physical set piece. Once physical testing on stage begins, there are usually more challenges that arise as all the pieces start coming together. And I'll play that clip one more time. It just sort of shows in real time us moving that lighting around, moving the poles around, doing some composition as a team. Yeah, and those are our two directors making a call to Chris at CBR. So for example, a challenge that we learned on set during this testing phase and also on the day of our shoots were that darker high contrast content can make scanlines and banding way more visible to the camera. And the plexiglass magnified and distorted the LED walls at certain angles, causing moire. And I picked this shot specifically because it was intended to be one hero key shot that would potentially go into the film as one take unedited. And I think I left a few steady cam takes in here. We kind of had to keep rolling as we were shooting this. What you can't necessarily see in this clip, because it's compressed and it's going through Zoom, is what we could see on the high dynamic range monitor. We could see all these artifacts and flaws, and like the banding looked very obvious on that screen. So it was just interesting to have to like go through takes and try to frame out certain artifacting issues as we went around. So as you can see, this building the shot, like the deeper we got into the shot, the more that we were using foreground objects and like angling the camera and pulling back and maybe not doing as many horizontal movements across that window. So yeah, happy to answer specific questions about that scene, but that was a really interesting one to do. And a lot of issues that we had with it didn't really show up until we had all of those elements in place, which leads us to our key findings for this environment. Testing motion and materials in front of LED walls is critical during early days. Scanlines and banding are a challenge to look out for. They are visible in darker, high contrast imagery, and surprise, PPE can have unwanted reflections in various surfaces, like specifically the face shields. So watch out for that. But so you can see some of how that one shot fit into our final film, and then a couple other beautiful shots that kind of came out of that environment. I cut a few clips.
The government treats people like they're disposable. I'm not going to sit here when people get enough to die for a meaningless war.
Meaningless? You tell that to people who lost their homes, and their families, their livelihoods to those things.
She's not there. Okay, just let me know if you hear anything, please. The last time we were all together, she had been so angry. Nothing. understand why.
So up next, our battlefield environment took us to a completely new stage and was created by a totally separate team of vendors. One of our main challenges in the battlefield was matching our practical and virtual sets. We had planned on shooting wider shots of the world, which would require more detail overall. Halon and Lux Machina were partnered vendors for this environment. Halon provided previs, techviz, VAD, and 100% remote consultation on set, while Lux provided our LED volume, its operation, and on-set content playback. So starting with reference images, our directors began designing the world with Halon's VAD team. They ultimately collected a ton of reference images with Rachel, their world building mentor, and built extensive lookbooks, and then were able to communicate their vision to Halon with those concepts and designs. Our production designer worked with both the virtual and physical art departments to execute her vision. And these are fun photos because this is a little further into production, you know, way further after like the lookbook designs, conversations about what was possible to do. And then this was a great day. She brought this physical design for the set, and I remember this really clearly. It was the one time that Kristen from Halon was able to visit in person, and they were able to connect and talk about, you know, the path, seeing the pathway in that physical design, and you know, if the directors wanted to rotate the world and the stage was static, how would they fit that path into the design as the virtual content moved around the stage. So just another example of how having your designs ready in advance and then have those conversations on stage earlier, way before the shoot. It's important for asking the right questions as you go down the pipeline. So having access to scan data of Lux's stage, we were able to design shots visualizing what it would be like to shoot them in the volume. This was a very important process for our DP. To the left, you can see our DP's plan to shoot the appropriate coverage for the scene. To the right is an image depicting a new way the DP had to learn to design shots. They had to take into account that the camera would stay in the same position relatively, and the virtual world would rotate behind the talent. It's important to talk about prep on stage and how we got from the on-set testing process to the final shoot. Each of these images represent a step in our process that builds on each other to create an in-camera visual effects shot. It was important to spend our testing days sharing successes and challenges with our AD at various stages in our process, so that we could help her anticipate how to use time on set most efficiently. So for example, you know, you're not just going into camera framing and then doing all your shot calls to action and blocking. You have a camera framing, and you are essentially building your set with that frame up. You've got to have the virtual content in play so that you can match your practical set. And then there's this period at the end, which I call final adjustments, lighting, content, set deck, and everything else, because depending on when you are calling the director in for approvals at each of these stages, there are still elements that could change and could affect the timing for each shot. And we felt that the more time we had with our AD on these test days to walk her through that process, the better it was for every department on set, because we were able to communicate in a clearer way. You know, this was planned time that we all knew might go into this shot, or this is unplanned time because we're having a computing error and we need a 10-minute grace period, something like that. So all of these steps occur between TechViz and the final shoot. As you can see, the Lex stage was much smaller than the XR stage, and its shape dictated how we created content and a shooting plan. This is an example of the final pixel imagery we were able to capture in camera on set. You can see the practical set is integrated well with our virtual background and is designed with a strong foreground, midground, and background. As I mentioned earlier, our photogrammetry truck asset made it into one of our battlefield shots. The challenges we faced were selling a low resolution scan as a final animated asset, as well as optimizing the content to play back at the proper frame rate with an animated asset moving in the back of the shot. So I'll play this again so you can check that out. It was something that we just wanted to try. We did photogrammetry of this asset and captured it. And we had such a short timeline on this project. We didn't have time or a vendor in place that could, rig it, clean it up, animate the wheels, do all this stuff. So we planned this shot in a way to see, okay, if we took this low res photogrammetry truck that we know is going to be out of focus, this is very far away in the shot and we're using this lens, can we sell that animation of the truck even if its wheels aren't moving? And our suspicion was yes, because it's rendering lighting in real time, so we'll see the shadow passing, and I think ultimately that was really successful. So I'm excited to share this because we really weren't sure how it was going to go down. And we had lots of conversations during prep for, backup game plans if it didn't work, but it did. So it's exciting. So key findings. Loading content on LED walls and QCing takes time. LED walls are run by computers that can overheat, reboot, and create power outages. It's important to set aside time for on set for adjustments when matching a physical and virtual set. And I just went over a few in that long list there, but I've also prepared clips from the battlefield sequence just to kind of show in context kind of what they look like and then how it connects with the truck, because I think it's pretty cool.
Most people who work for the union are either fighting battles or cleaning up after it, scouring the battlefields for remnants of weaponry, and sometimes even chips that can be recycled for the next group of soldiers. Ara used to say that the chips implanted in soldiers actually turn them into mindless robots, programmed to do nothing but fight until death. I had never seen Dad get so angry.
No enemy to show. Sign up for our training program today.
So that's really the end of my presentation. I just wanted to close by saying, overall, if planned properly, virtual production techniques can be accessible and affordable, and understanding how to reallocate project resources, build the right team, and plan ahead for a project's desired results are the key to unlocking these workflows.
So just everyone, and thank you so much, Kathryn. Really appreciate it. It's great insight and wisdom. And we do have a white paper coming out. We'll probably release it hopefully early next week that has the documentation of all these use cases. Kathryn and Greg have done an amazing job of help really documenting all these different aspects, how you do them, how you deal with them, what's going on, what's going to be your challenges. So the recording of this session will also be posted on therippleeffectfilm.com. So if anybody wants to go back and catch part of this or review it again, it will also be there as well. So thank you, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone else for showing up. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Bye.